Hey everyone, real quick, unfortunately the last Pathfinder session, my recording software only recorded my audio and the system sounds from my speakers rather than my headset, so it doesn't have any of the, any of the audio from the Dungeon Master or any other characters. It also recorded some music, which I obviously don't really want in the video. But I didn't want to get rid of the footage entirely because there was a lot of hilarious things to talk about. For example, the fact that Dwayne's new character, Eric, or AA Rick, just hit Killian for, 49 points of damage with a crit. So the first thing that occurred was Chandra approached Ashira, kind of saying, "Hey, there's a ritual that could potentially help Rickety regain consciousness." But it requires transferring of life force from one person to another, and there are some risk involved. Essentially, this was uh, Wes's way of getting rid of Killian, because the person that plays as Killian, Chris, is no longer with us. Needless to say, he was complaining a lot and just kept bitching and was pretty toxic in the chats. So we kicked him out, and we just needed to give him a proper sending off. So we essentially the Shiro was like, yeah, sure, we'll sacrifice Killian. So we went and fought him. Not much to say about the fight. I just really wanted to point out that literally the attack roll that Dwayne did was literally a crit, and so we just joked about how he really wanted to murder a player. Now we did some dual damage because we didn't want to kill him. We wanted him alive. We just wanted him unconscious so we can do the ritual. As in the background right now, it's just showing that I'm looting Killian's stuff, and I'll also start doing things like spellcraft checks because Ashira will help with the ritual to try to help Rickety recover. Um, while that's going on, there's a little bit of bonding between Kaylor, my cohort, and Dwayne's character, AA Rick. Um, the reason why we call him AA Rick is just a joke from the Key and Peele. So it's just from that thing. Anyway, but essentially it was Kaylor, freaking AA Rick, and Spiff. I was kind of just role playing as Spiff while Ashira was doing the ritual stuff, and they kind of got along and things like that, and giving high fives, and we started joking about how this could be the new A team with Spiff being the face, and we got Kaylor and freaking, of course, A. Rick, and we were joking about that, and they eventually spotted something. They started hearing stuff outside, and so they went up to the top of the tower to go talk to the guards there, and sure enough, they saw some dead bodies along the shoreline. At this point, they went and grabbed Ashira to go and check it out. Originally, I was kind of joking about the fact that I could have just sent Spiff by himself. And left Ashira to kind of just do the ritual. If there were more people, Wes would have actually done that, but unfortunately, a lot of people couldn't make it. Freaking Lord Captain Avon could not make it, and we also couldn't get. And Ryan actually had lost power, and he never really got it back. So it was me, Dwayne, and two new characters that are going to be joining us. Obviously, Darren made a new character who will be coming in a bit, and also Dustin from way back is finally rejoining us, and he has his own character as well. But right now, literally, I'm just the group is doing its thing, kind of just getting information, and we're about to jump into the next section there. Alright, so on the main map, it really kind of just showed our progress. The green square represents our current location. We went to the docks first. It's actually rather late at night. There were several multiple hours parts for the ritual, and it's still not completed, but pretty much Chandra said she can hold it for now while Shira went to see what's going on the island. And we went and checked out the bodies and found that they had puncture wounds very similar to a trident. At that point, of course, Ashira knew that the Sahugwin had struck again. Apparently, they weren't just after Ragnar and decided to start attacking the island itself. They made a there was obviously some commotion off in the distance towards where the all the peasants are resting in the little tent town, that the makeshift tent town. And so we started heading in that direction. We cut across the marsh and the river to go straight there, and eventually we ran into the first encounter here, which was four Sahuagin warriors. Originally, we fought regular Sahuagin, which had around like 11 hit points and stuff. They were really easy to take down. Obviously, they are only dangerous because they got the drop on Ragnar's crew back in the day. But these are warrior types, which are stronger, hit harder, better saves, and well over 30 HP with each of them. It's not too bad for this particular group because right now it's Ashira, Rick, and of course Kaelor. And Kaelor and Rick can both hit for base 20 damage rather easily. So for this fight, it was mostly just sleep hexes, Kaelor and Rick essentially splitting up and just smashing things on both sides. These guys do have crossbows, and so they do fire from a distance. And I think this was the first introduction to one of Kaelor's spells. Kaelor is a summoner. Technically, the summoner is banned in this campaign, but Wes. I mean, I took the leadership feat, so of course I got a cohort, and Wes wanted to have fun with it, and so he decided to see what he can do with the summoner. There's been a lot of revamps and stuff, so he was just kind of checking it out to see how it plays, and it is still pretty overpowered, but I was completely okay with it, and I mean, to be honest, I've been holding back anyway because my character is 7th level, and the rest of the group is mostly 5th and 6th now. I mean, you've already seen kind of how Cheryl works. Her AoE CC crowd control is so powerful at this point that we clear out ships in a matter of seconds. But yeah, so essentially the group, you can see Rick went one way, and Kaelor will go the other way. Yeah, Kaelor is a summoner, so he does have some spells. And he was planning on, he showed off, what's it called? Protection from Arrows, which is an hour's long buff, 1 hour per level, and essentially gives you 10 damage reduction against any normal ranged weapons, essentially. It does have a limit. Once it absorbs a certain amount of damage, it wears off automatically, but it's like really high. So essentially, he cast it on Ashira to ensure she doesn't get hit with stray arrows, which, obviously Kaelor's role is to be Ashira's guardian, so that very much fits. But the protection from arrows was definitely very significant in this particular session because there's a lot of ranged attacks, and all those ranged attacks do definitely add up. One thing to note about Rick is Rick does tons of damage, but he's also he's essentially like a witch elf if you are familiar with Warhammer. Very, very devastating in melee, but he also gets wrecked really easily. He has like no AC. His AC is like 14 when he's raging. If we enlarge him, his AC goes down even further, down to about a 12. Which he does have a lot of HP because he's a barbarian, but man, he eats up health rather easily, or rather quickly. Which unfortunately is one of the few situations where I actually had to use heals again because a lot of our ship battles have been just over within a matter of rounds, and so healing was never an issue. But this was one of the situations where we just had really we had characters that literally just started taking damage. Of course, Kaelor has 31 AC because he's ridiculous. But even he actually took some damage, and I believe in this fight, in fact, some of the stray bolts actually hit him with natural 20s. Of course, I mean, with a summoner, his particular build, I believe he's a synthesis summoner, which essentially he takes his summon and he literally wears it as armor, and essentially gives him a bubble of HP. It's very, very devastating. But he's also completely focused on just protecting Ashira, so a lot of times he'll probably hang back. He didn't really hang back too much in this particular session, simply because we had such a small group, and the new characters aren't particularly they're not particularly strong in comparison to where we're at. Part of that's because all the new characters have been starting at 5th level, which puts them behind a little bit. But to be honest, I mean, the fact that Shira has survived for so long, she needs her being higher level than everyone else kind of makes sense. Anyway, we'll go ahead and like I said, I'm going to keep some of these battles in the background. I'll probably clip a bunch of stuff to kind of, you know, make this a reasonable length as best as possible. But give me one moment. All right, so when the fight was finally done, one of the things I was asked is whether or not we were going to take prisoners. Kaylor kind of asked. Pretty much my response was another question, which was to Wes of whether or not there was more coming, or do we notice more combat up ahead? And the answer was, of course, yes. So we fought, four of the warriors so far. I did a cure moderate healing hex on AA Rick, and AA Rick at this point, while we're transitioning to the next thing, he pretty much he offered a wand that he purchased as part of his character creation. He stated that his one of his adventuring partners that's no longer that had passed away, named Baloo, or however pronounce it, had used this wand, but it got used up, so he bought another wand, and he wanted to give it to me to potentially use it to support him. I of course responded that I'm not his healing bot, but I accepted it anyway. It was a fully charged Cure Light Wound wand, which I whispered to Wes. I was like, I'll put this next to my other wand of Cure Light Wounds that I have. So I have around 80. I think I have like around 70 or 80 charges worth of Cure Light Wounds amongst two wands now. One thing I definitely talked about, the conversation got a bit halted because the moment he said Baloo, I was like, isn't that the character from fucking the bear from like the Jungle Book or something like that? And that pretty much shut everything down real quick. I let him continue and say his little piece and all that stuff. I mean, it's Dwayne, he's trying. Anyway, we jumped into our next fight, which was going to be across. As you probably, it might have been kind of hard to see, but the green box got moved over to pretty much where the river was at, which is more of like a creek. It's just kind of a little water source, but it does count as difficult terrain, and we were going to go ahead and push our way through. One thing I forgot to mention about the fight before this one was it was all difficult terrain, which slowed us down quite a bit. And this one is just the river that is difficult terrain, and everything else is all right. This particular fight, there was 6 Sahagween warriors this time, and wasn't anything too out of the ordinary. Kaylor went ahead and buffed AA Rick with a protection from arrows as well, so both him and Ashera are practically immune to ranged attacks at the moment. Fight started. One of the things that is kind of a theme in this, at least in the beginning of the session, is freaking AA Rick got so many crits. He critted, of course, on the fight against Killian. I'm pretty sure he got a crit during the last fight. I'm pretty sure he's going to get a crit in this fight. He did, and his crits do massive amounts of damage. It does double. So, I mean, he's easily doing like 50 damage to some of these 40 to 50 damage with some of these crits. So anyway, the fight started. He pretty much charged across, and while his protection from arrow buff protected him from the arrows, it didn't protect him from the tridents, which do quite a bit of damage. So he definitely took quite a beating in this fight. One thing I definitely like about this particular session was the escalation of the fights little by little. I essentially majority of the time I spent most of these fights just doing slumber hexes, which is kind of a nice return to the old form. Um, and I really only used a few spells in the first part where I just used first level spells to heal as best as I can on AA Rick. Um, as you probably have seen with my spell list, I don't really memorize that many healing spells. I have the healing hex, of course, which is kind of reusable. I can use it once on each person every day. And besides that, I only have a few Cure Light Wound spells memorized at first level because I choose not to use any fire magic now. So all I have is Mage Armors and Cure Light Wounds for first level spells. And that's pretty much all my healing. The rest of my healing is in potions and wands at this point. But I don't like spending, I don't like throwing money away, so I'm trying to be as conservative as possible. But it's been pretty difficult since Aeric takes so much damage. But him taking the damage is better than, Ashira taking the damage, though Ashira actually has pretty good AC. You might also notice that Ashira is now always having a lot of icons active. That's mainly because she has a ward hex always active, and she reapplies it anytime she gets an opportunity to, if she ever gets hit. Ward hex will stay up until she takes damage or fails the saving throw, and then literally there's no limit, so she can just put it back on as much as she wants. It just takes an action. The other buff is, of course, Mage Armor. She's 7th level now. Mage Armor lasts 1 hour per level, so with 3 memorized, I can keep Mage Armor up for 21 out of 24 hours a day. And next level, I'll be able to keep it up essentially for an entire day. So I literally just told Wes, hey, I want to memorize 3 Mage Armors and just have it up at all the time. So now I don't have to spend an action casting Mage Armor. Which usually, Mage Armor is not that big of a deal of a buff, but since a lot of the fights we've been doing is like 1 fight per day because of ship battles, I'd rather not spend actions, waste, what little time spent in combat be spent on buffing. Anyway, so the fight itself, like I said, it was pretty straightforward. We just, trampled everything as best as possible. It was in this fight, though, that the new characters were introduced. I was actually I wasn't sure what to expect for the new characters, personally. I knew what they were, obviously. Darren's new character is a female, I think human, that is a wizard that tries to specialize in Conjuration, which Conjuration is a little annoying because Summon Monster really is not that good of a spell, but he really wanted to be a summoner. Obviously, the class Summoner is not accessible to him because it's overpowered, but he put forth the effort and, told Wes what monsters he wished to summon, and we kind of just went from there. And, it is what it is. He also rolled the holy grail of stats. His stat rolls were literally 16, 16, 17, 17, and 18, 18. So he's definitely got some of the best stats in the game. Well, it's best stats I've ever seen roll, really. And Dwayne's character, Eric, also has those stats. Dustin's new character is also a female human that is a brawler, which is essentially a hybrid class of monk and fighter. And essentially, she just punches things. She's supposedly specialized in things like dirty fighting, but honestly, dirty fighting isn't that great. She attempted it once and then never bothered again. But yeah, so the thing I was concerned about was like, when were these people going to be added in? Because at this point, it's been about an hour or two since the session started, and these characters are supposed to be introduced. I don't know exactly what their background was. Obviously, I showed their description and stuff like that. Also, this is one of the rare occasions where we have a lot more female characters than usual. Obviously, I usually play female characters nowadays, but usually most of the other people don't. So this was a weird situation where literally it's half and half now. There's half male characters and half female characters. One of the concerns I had was whether or not how these people would be introduced. I thought that we were going to run into them like on an island or something like that, and they would have to like essentially prove that they are worth being rescued or something like that. But in this case, Wes went essentially Terminator. These people literally just came in a beam of light. Supposedly, these two were in a sinking ship, and they attempted to use a spell scroll, which ended up whisking them away into this location. They were trying to get out of danger and ended up getting into, well, similar danger. But they at least weren't on a sinking ship. They were obviously confused, as was everyone else. It's also supposed to be nighttime right now, so really the human characters shouldn't be seeing anything, which is essentially Rick and Sarah. Sarah is the brawler. Kyrie is the the summoner character, the wizard summoner conjurer. Kyrie is actually an elf. I don't know if it's half elf or full-blooded elf, but that's what the description shows. But yeah, for this fight, they didn't exactly do too much. Actually, Kyrie did one thing. She cast Enlarge on Rick, which of course introduced him to the wonderful world of having 12 AC. But it did enlarge him, making his damage pretty extensive. There was a little bit of confusion about what a 2d4 damage actually upgrades to when you enlarge, because 2d4 is not exactly a common die roll for weapons, because that's usually things like scythes and things like that. But we found it was going to be 2d6, which, it is what it is. But yeah, the fight was pretty straightforward. I slept most of them, and then the rest got just bashed. And freaking Rick, I think, got like 2 crits in this fight. It's pretty ridiculous. Kaelor, of course, we had his attack is called High Five, because obviously the jokes from his initial encounter, where he's just so cheerful and stuff like that. A few other things that got changed. Kaelor is now my bosun, and my former bosun, Jack Scrimshaw, is now a navigator. I also made Rosie Cuswell lead actress because of the whole Titanic movie joke. Alright, so there was a brief aside where we just tried to figure out who these people were. Obviously, there was kind of some more pressing matters, such as trying to save their people from the Sahuagin attack. But they, both Sarah and Kari pretty much just didn't really know exactly what happened. They don't know. They were on a ship, and they kind of used a scroll to kind of escape, and now they're in this situation. I was like, alright, great, well, I mean, at least one of you is a spellcaster, I'll just take you along. Um, Obviously, I pretty much just like, alright, we're going to deal with this issue and have Avon figure out what to do with you guys, since you guys kind of just teleported onto his island. Um, Personally, I think Kyrie would probably be best on Avon's ship, because Avon's crew doesn't include any sort of arcane casters, so Kyrie would be a good fit. Sarah can really be with anybody at this point, but probably will end up on my ship, and that will end up being a 3-3 split, which will be kind of, decent. Anyway, as you can probably see, the fights got all the way to the tent town. Obviously, Wes is reusing the map from Rickety Squibs, and fights against more warriors. There's a lot more of them. There's at least 4 in the beginning, and then another, I think another 4 beyond that. One thing that I've been doing after every fight, of course, is looting all the bodies. Sahuagin pretty much have mostly just coral-based shit, but all of them that hadn't drank a potion actually had a cure moderate wounds potion. So we were definitely getting a nice little stockpile of cure moderate potions built up. I passed a few out to the other party members. One funny thing that did happen during the previous fight was Rick had one potion from as part of what he purchased for his starting gear, and he pulled it out to prepare to drink it for the next round, and the Sahuagin actually did a called shot and broke his vial, and he got pretty unhappy about that, because his one healing potion got destroyed by crossbow bolts, because obviously they couldn't target him with crossbow bolts because they wouldn't do any damage. But anyway, this fight is there's a little bit more to it. It's essentially the party kind of split and kind of spread out across the area, and both Sarah and Kaelor went along the bottom where the bridge is at, and then everyone else kind of started moving north and started spreading a little to the left as things started coming in. I had Smith do a bunch of scouting to try to get information, but his perception wasn't too well. But yeah, we fought. Smith was able to reveal the other 4 Sahuagin, but there was also a sniper that was kind of using some stealth stuff and shooting poison arrows at people. This was also when Kari showed off some of her summons. She summoned the hyena and used, of course, a Disney Lion King hyena as the token. And for the most part, the fight went pretty well. Um, I did sleep hexes, of course. I did use my last cure light wounds on AA Rick partway through the fight. AA Rick took up a huge beating. He ended up getting tripped at one point, and because he was trying to charge the freaking sniper, and when he charged, the person did attack opportunity using a trip attack instead of a regular attack, and essentially made him fall flat on his face, which definitely delayed him. Also, he was burning through rage like crazy. He pretty much was going to run out of rage rather soon at this point. This fight, like I said, I did mostly just sleep hexes. Some of them made the save, some didn't, and I was hoping to keep one alive so we can question it. But AA Rick ended up murdering everything with no remorse. The sniper ended up escaping simply because I tried to hold person it, but it managed to resist. If you hadn't noticed already, I kind of been editing the speed of the video, mainly just to make sure that the entire thing's narrated, and I didn't exactly want to talk for hours on end. And really, it was just to kind of speed up things and hopefully give you guys something to watch while I continue talking. In any case, so the sniper resisted the hold person and fled, so that ended that combat. Pretty much the loot was pretty much the same. Every single one of the warriors had a cure moderate potion. At this point, AA Rick was really haggard. He took a lot of damage. I believe he's completely out of rage at this point, which also put him in exhaustion. So this gave us a little bit of time to kind of just sit back and figure out what we're going to do next. The rest of the forces fled towards I guess the mountains or the ridge line or whatever, and going towards the ocean. We did find two of the guards that were from the tower that were pretty much just put in the tent town to kind of watch over things, make sure the peasants don't go too rowdy or anything like that. But both of them were actually killed. One was killed by arrows, the other was killed by tridents. At this point, we're like, all right, we kind of need to make a decision about what to do next. I was pretty good in my situation. I wasn't tapped out on spells yet. I used up all my heals, of course, but I did have the wand and stuff. AA Rick was already asking for charges from the wand that he gave, but I told him to wait until we've confirmed that whether or not we're going to continue fighting or anything, because if not, there's no reason to waste it. Kaelor ended up using one of his wands to essentially evolve his Eidolon suit to get wings, or essentially like hydro jetpack type things for flight. And he flew back. He flew around the area, and then also dropped by the tower to check on Chandra. Chandra, the ritual was completed, and Killian was, of course, killed because his life force was taken. He kind of mentioned that was kind of an evil thing to do, but I kind of, obviously part of this was mainly just to give Killian a proper sending off, since so far anyone that has retired has died so far, and we're keeping that trend going. He mentioned there was no other forces in the area, and so that kind of just left us considering to pursue the others. I went ahead and used my flight hex because his evolution thing only lasts about a minute per level, so his wore off after 5 minutes. I had some flight left. I used a little bit of flight just to kind of goof around and walk on water and stuff like that in the beginning of the session. But I still have 5 or 6 minutes left of flight for my flight hex, so I went ahead and used that to kind of scout towards the ridge line, and saw that majority of the Sahaguins have already fled into the ocean, but there was a rear guard, and this was our last opportunity to try to capture anybody. So that's kind of why we went ahead and moved on. I went ahead and used one charge of Cure Light Wounds on AA Rick. I used my partially spent wand that I Ragnar and Ashira purchased what away back then. Um, anyway, the map was pretty straightforward. There's a little red line that's essentially an arrow going up on the right side to show that is increasing elevation, and then the yellow line is essentially the peak, and everything beyond the yellow line is downhill. So essentially, going uphill was half movement, and then going downhill, if you're charging or dashing, you have to make acrobatics because obviously running downhill is actually slightly dangerous. Um, then Kaelor was like, "Hey, who wants to be big?" and ended up making himself, AA Rick, and was it Sarah or Sandra, or whatever her name is. Oh, actually, it's right there. Sarah, also huge. So of course that increased their damage, their reach, their strength, but also debuffed their AC and their dexterity. He asked if Ashera wanted to be huge. She declined. Anyway, so for this fight, Ashera went ahead and applied her Iron Skin buff, so her AC went up to 23, and everyone just started moving up. Once AA Rick got to the top of the ridge line, or top of the hill, he saw what was on the other side and saw there are 4 Sahagwan warriors, as well as a fancier Sahagwan that has essentially we later learn is a meteor hammer, which is essentially kind of like a ball and chain type weapon. And essentially, they opened fired on AA Rick. Of course, he still had protection from arrows, so it didn't do anything. But then the ball and chain guy had reach, moved up, and pretty much hit AA Rick for a ton of damage. It did both regular damage and acid damage. I did learn late after the session that off screen, Wes actually rolled a crit, and that would have immediately taken out AA Rick, but he just turned it into a normal hit. I have no complaints about it. I mean, we're still kind of in this transition phase of getting used to the party, and we've of course got new people and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff to kind of work out. This is kind of a weird situation where we're essentially in the next arc of a campaign, but we have essentially a completely new party. Anyway, I was still playing catch up, trying to get up the hill. I had to spend a round only going up 15 because I was doing Iron Skin on myself. I have to cast Iron Skin during the fight because Iron Skin is only a minute per level. Um, but once again, the strategy was essentially to split up, which was kind of weird. Sarah tried to stealth, which of course reduced her movement to a quarter, and she rolled a natural 1. Dustin has really horrible luck when it comes to rolling die rolls. We've noticed it when he was playing his gunner character, and his test rolls with this character were horrible as well. Um, anyway, All right, so pretty much main things that happened during the fight. Obviously, AA Rick took a lot of pummeling. I think he was down to single-digit HP by the end of the fight, as well as Sora. Um, Kyrie also she got pelted by arrows, took some pretty good damage. I don't know how much hit points she had left, but she pretty much was tapped out on spells by the end of the fight. She used a few magic missiles that she had left. She also did Summon Monster 3 and Summon a Crocodile, which of course she used the image from TikTok Croc from Peter Pan, which promptly got immediately killed by one of the snipers. Speaking of snipers, in the top left and top right corner, snipers appeared. So it was snipers, that ball and chain guy, and then 4 warriors was the fight. So the only other thing of note was I did lightning bolts. I got attacked once, which of course missed. Any of the arrows that hit me didn't do damage, so I went through this entire fight without taking any significant harm. But I did the ball and chain did try to hit me once, but missed, and I moved myself into a position where I can hit lightning bolt on the ball and chain and the sniper at the same time. I rolled the worst I rolled a terrible lightning bolt roll. I had 7d6, and all my rolls were 3 or lower. Majority of them were 2s. So I actually burned a hero point to maximize my damage. So I'm down to 2 hero points again, finally. I was kind of okay with spending it simply because I actually wasted a hero point from my last level up because I already had 3. Every time you level up, you get a hero point, of course. So I did 42 damage to both of them, but they both made their reflex saves, so they took only 21, but that was still a significant amount of damage. I attempted to glitter dust 2 of the warriors, failed. They both made their saves the first time. Then I glitter dusted them again when they started to flee, and one of them failed. And then I sleep tacked them and tied them up. We killed one of the snipers, but the other one managed to flee, as well as 1 warrior managed to flee. Besides that, it was kind of a straightforward fight. As for loot, there was of course the potions. All the warriors or whatever had potions, which at this point I divvied up the cure moderates. Pretty much everyone got 3 each, and then I think that left me with 6 spares, which I went ahead and just put in my own little group, I guess, ship loot. The meteor hammer was a +1 caustic meteor hammer, so that is essentially worth. It's a market price around 8,000 gold, like 8310 is I believe the total gold amount. The sniper that we killed had a few poison arrows, 6 of them. And also had a masterwork composite short bow with strength 4 as its composite. And that was pretty much it. I guess one thing to mention, AA Rick went straight after the sniper in the top right corner, and it actually switched to a trident, which was also poisoned. And AA Rick took a ton of damage and got poisoned. He complained a little bit about how high the DCs were, but of course, this is we're the next tier of freaking combat at this point, so it is what it is. But AA Rick only passed 2 of his saves, and he had to pass 2. He passed 2 saves, but not in a row, and so he ended up taking the full brunt of the poison. The poison is strength based. Also, the sniper's arrows were also poisoned, so Kyrie actually took a little bit of poison in the previous fight as well. But of course, casters and strength isn't too big of a deal until you get really low. But yeah, it was a really good fight. I ended up using, of course, a 3rd level spell slot with lightning bolts, and I used up the rest of my 2nd level spell slots. So I still had my 4th levels, and I still had my 3 of my 3rd level spells, so I was still pretty good to go. But at this point, there was nothing left of the fight. Everything else had fled into the ocean. The glitter dust does highlight. It does like -40 stealth because it covers you in literally glittering dust. So the Sahuagin that fled, I actually saw go into the ocean and pretty much escape into the depths. As mentioned before, we did take a prisoner. We tied him up and took him prisoner. And when I went to try to speak to him, because myself and Kaelor can speak Aquan, the thing literally spoke in Sahuagin, pretty much cursed us, and bit into a tooth and killed himself. So these guys were definitely professional assassin types. So that was a little bit additional information, but we couldn't get anything else out of it because it killed itself. Kaylor does speak Sahagwin, so he did say pretty much literally just cursed us, and that was it. I did check on Chandra and Rickety. Rickety has woken up, but he's still taking in everything that has happened. Obviously, he lost everything because of the evil that Ragnar released. Besides that, so we divvied up. I took account of the loot. I told the two new people that they can stay in the tent town since obviously some of them are now unoccupied. And from there, we'll figure out what to do from there. I pretty much suggested I'll probably be doing a divination spell to see if I can get more information about where the Sahagwin came from. Obviously, next session I'll also be asking Lady Agasta if this is a common occurrence, because this was definitely a pretty big attack. I mean, obviously, we had encounters with Sahagwin before with the other group, but Ashir is really the only one that's had this issue of running into them, so she's definitely a bit curious to see what this issue is, and she definitely wants it to stop. Anyway, that's pretty much it. So we got our plan for next time. We got pretty decent experience. I'm about less than 10k away from level 8. Obviously, the rest of the group has been asking questions about how they can possibly catch up with the rest of the group, which I guess is just me. But at this point, since they've been showing up late and been pretty flaky about showing up, Wes is in no hurry to really reward that sort of laziness. But I mean, honestly, being level 5 is not that big of a deal, and I mean, even if I was level 5 still, it wouldn't make much of a difference. You've seen how I play with this witch character. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what happens next. The fact that these guys flood into the ocean definitely emphasizes that we're going to probably do some underwater shit soon, which hopefully will give Ashira some business with her potion crafting, because she can craft water-breathing potions. Yeah, so that's pretty much the gist of it. I apologize again for all the freaking editing issues. Hopefully you can get some enjoyment of seeing stuff in the background. I mean, I sped it up so it can all fit. I hopefully fixed the issue. I'll know once I start recording the D&D video if I fixed it or not. But yeah, I am the Depressed Eeyore. This was your recap of the last Pathfinder session. See you guys later.